Hello data enthusiasts, welcome to the Open Data Café, the podcast of DataEuropa.eu, the official portal for European data. In each episode our fantastic guests will share insights and experiences on open data. Whether we're talking about how open data can foster transparency in government, kickstart innovative new businesses, enable powerful AIs or empower citizens like you and me, we got it all covered. I'm your host, Gianfranco Cecconi. I've been knee-deep in the data sharing scene for quite some time, many of which contributing to DataEuropa.eu. Today I am the Executive Director of the Data Spaces Support Center, yet another initiative dedicated to the implementation of the European Data Strategy. Our guest for today is Ian McGill, an entrepreneur and founder of Spend Network. Since about a decade ago, he has been collecting and creating insight into procurement in public sector. Ian will describe the challenges of procurement data and how these changed over time. He'll share with us what it takes to be an entrepreneur and make your business a success when relying so much on open data. And now, let's meet Ian. Hello Ian, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Gianfranco?
I'm very good. Where do I find you today? Where are you?
So I'm perched on the south coast of the UK at the moment, and it's a kind of warm autumn day.
Yeah, same here in the Netherlands. I'm very glad you accepted my invitation to come and tell us about your enterprise, Spend Network, because it's a great example of how you can actually build an entire business, a startup in your case, perhaps when it started many years ago, around open data and what open data can enable you to do and the insight it can produce. But first, tell us a little about yourself and about Spend Network.
So my name's Ian McGill. I run a company called Spend Network, and we have a very simple goal, which is to gather up all of the procurement data in the world and to publish it openly. So we have probably the largest procurement database in the world now. We collect data from over 750 sources every day, and we stick that all in a large API, and we sell that back to government in some cases, and then to suppliers as well. And we use it to try and make sense of the $13 trillion public procurement market.
Can I ask you to take a step back, perhaps, for our audience to understand better what do we mean by procurement? What's the process behind it, and why so much money is there?
Yeah, so actually that you're very completely correct, because procurement is one of those industries that, like a lot of industries, IT, etc., that have this their own language that can make it that can sound like a barrier to people. So let me explain in simple terms. Governments, when they spend money, they have to adopt a process to prevent any to both prevent corruption, but also the perception of corruption. They want to run fair, competitive processes for their contracts. So that process is typically called procurement, and what people do is they write up a specification saying these are the items or services that we need, and that can be anything from building a new destroyer for the Navy through to getting haircuts in prisons. And governments have to buy all of those things. So what they do is they say, this is our requirement, and then they invite suppliers to bid to complete that work. And they look at the bids and turn around and say, okay, this is the one that we're going to go for because we believe it has the right mix of price and delivery.
So most of this is a competitive process, and has it always happened in the open, or it's a new thing?
So almost all competitive processes. I think in the open, there's that sense of actually we were doing a lot of stuff publicly many years ago. For many years, we've been doing things publicly, but not necessarily in the open. So that key distinction between, okay, yeah, we put it online, or we put it in in a journal that everyone can see, and actually committing to make it open and make it reusable. That change really, and it was a lot of activity by the European Union in 2005, I think, 2006, that really made it that commitment to openness, which was really exciting, actually. That was probably when we were both at the Open Data Institute all those years ago.
Yeah, probably we need to make a disclosure there that we've been knowing each other for a very long time, because we were both at the Open Data Institute about 10 years ago, when it was early days for you and your startup Spend Network, and for me as a young, so to speak, consultant in open data and data sharing. So you said earlier we went from public to open, and that perhaps is also where your idea for Spend Network came 10 years ago. So can you explain us what the difference, I would say, just in case it wasn't obvious, and what the role of open data was in this transformation?
So I think in the practical terms, you can publish something online and you still own it. And if someone comes along and uses that information, you're effectively breaching the copyright. So what we found is this: what the move to become open rather than public is to say, we will grant you the right to use this data. So the data that we gather from the European Union, from the tender portal called TED, that is run by Tenders European Daily, that is run by the European Union, that has a license that allows me, you, anyone to use it and to further the work that we do. And that's a really bold and exciting thing to do, because it encourages business and it allows people like me to employ lots of people to work through that data. So, it's a really positive thing. And I think it's a really important stress. There's a difference between being public, okay, I'm going to put it where anyone can see it, and being open, which is I'm going to put it where you can use it, and I want you to take it and use it. It's a really important distinction.
I would like to use an analogy that I sometimes used in the past to tell the difference. That is, say, let's say, I'm privileged enough to have a front garden in my house, and I don't have a gate. Anybody could walk into it and use it, but it's not exactly a good thing to do, right? So, but if I instead opened it as a public park, then I would want people to go there. So the fact that we can access information, say, just go to a website and copy and paste from it, doesn't mean that we have the permission to do it. And this may feel subtle to the ones who are not, let's say, practitioners, but it is actually a quite real problem for the rest of us. If you go to the bottom of most websites, you will find in the small print something that ensures the copyright to a specific publisher or entity of some kind, and the license, that is what gives you or me permission to reuse it, is a very different thing. And that's a historical problem, probably one of the very first things you learn when entering the open data world. That is, you may have content that is copyrighted, and then you may have a license on top of that copyright. Copyright is not a bad thing. The bad thing is when it's not clear what the license is. And in the case of Spend Network, of course, is the license being appropriate that is what enables you to offer the services you described. And you've been around also long enough to perhaps give us an idea of how the data you have described changed. And we talked about Europe a lot, but it's not just about Europe, right? So the kind of work you do extends beyond the Union. Can you tell us a little about it, and how does it differ from the European experience?
Well, it's fascinating in many, many ways. So we've worked in Colombia, Malaysia, South Africa, Indonesia, Australia, and UK, Ireland. We have a business in mainland Europe as well, so we consider ourselves sort of fairly global. And we've seen some very high quality data coming out of Latin America, for example. Colombia published a lot of data, very pretty good quality. Some key areas that could be improved on, but Mexico went through a stage of publishing a lot of data. Likewise, Africa, you can tell when there's an initiative, there's a bunch of data gets produced and then it tends to slow down. That consistency can be difficult in Africa, but we see good data in Kenya, good data in South Africa, and it's I think there's a lot of progress being made. We'd like to see, and I know the World Trade Organization and the IMF and others, want to see more data on procurement transparency. So,
for the ones in the audience who feel entrepreneurial and they want to follow in your steps, if you started a company today for which open data was a main resource, what would be your advice to the audience? If you started today, where to focus, what kind of challenges open data gives you today that they will need to deal with?
So, these questions, you're always tempted to say, do what I did, right? Or just like, well, or don't do what I did. You always view these questions through your own lens of experience. I think the most important thing you can do is find a customer for your work. And if you start with a spreadsheet and said, I do this and this and this, is that useful? And someone says, yeah, build me a service or build me an API or build me one of those things and I'll buy it. That's the most important bit you can, because there's a lot of it, and I count myself in this, there's a lot of time spent linking up data that has we're linking it up or we're processing it because we can, and people won't buy it. It's not sufficiently useful to make everyone go, oh, that's useful, that I'm going to use that. So that's the first thing I would say, is find something that someone's going to buy. Another piece of advice that I think is really important that someone said to me at I think very early stage was, the only reason you should be building a business on open data is if you think it can be global.
That's an interesting one.
And the idea is that, whether that's geospatial data or transport data or all of those, you should have an ambition to make your data a global resource. Because if you can envisage from the outset that it becomes scalable to that level, then you've genuinely got something. You know that it. If you sit there and go, I mean, like we would struggle to get all of the data from China, for example, and I mentioned that, but it doesn't mean we can't try, and we will, and we do try and make progress in those sort of places. But the general ambition to have something that's global, I think, adds a sort of multiple of 10 to the potential value of what you're going to do. It will create a lot of challenges, but there's no one going to come to you and say, well, okay, if you did this and this, and then you could do the rest of the world. If you start from a global perspective and you start solving problems from a global perspective, then I think that investors and others will look at you with a much kinder eye, because they know they can sell it in multiple places.
There's something I'm curious to ask you, not necessarily because it's a question of mine, because I expect others perhaps to wonder as they listen to us. That is, we are sometimes used to expect something fishy when something is freely available, right? I wonder if, in your experience as an entrepreneur and founder on top of a business that needs open data, if it is in any way more risky than perhaps basing it on commercial data. Is there some kind of balance? Perhaps you get something more on one side, a bit less on the other. Can we trust open data today, or we should be wary?
So I think this is the heart of this is the real, the fine detail and the point at which we differentiate between private data and open data is really, really vital, that we understand and we can present to you as a consumer of our data the progeny or the audit, where this data came from, when we collected it, where we've augmented it and improved it, and where we've left it the same, or what other things that we've done with it, so that anyone can look at that and go, I completely understand the journey that data has taken from its original source and into my database. Now, anyone else that is working with commercially defined data that they don't want you to see the original source of, they will cut off that audit and they will say, look, you just need to trust that we're doing the best job. Well, that's fine. But if you're going to invest, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars into a belief that there's a growing number of certain companies, or that there's a growing number of tender opportunities, and I can't present to you the absolute truth why this is the right data, then I don't think you should be making that investment. So it's not just that open data is, it's free or whatever. It's the fact that it is, I can tell you where it came from, and I present it out to you with a complete history of how we gathered it and treated it, that gives you the confidence that you're doing the right thing with it.
In a way, it's like saying that open data has raised the bar for everybody. So in terms of accountability, the documentation of provenance and lineage, that would be the technical terms for this. So both where the data comes from and the transformation it went through before it gets into your plate, let's say. And the last question for me, that I believe is an interesting point to touch on, and I know the answer already, that's why I'm throwing it at you, that is, it's easy to talk about reusing open data by someone else, but do you also offer your own open data to others?
Yeah, so the way we do it is we have an API that anyone can use, and they can take that data. It just doesn't have any of the augmentations and tidiness that the extra additional features that we add to the data. If you want to access those, you have to pay for it. But we make that data available to governments and to journalists, and we try and help people understand what's happening with their with markets. And so we recently did an analysis of all of the COVID purchasing across Europe. What was being bought, when it was bought, what the quality of the data was. We did that a couple of years ago. We published that data with SINTEF in Norway, and we're now, we're using AI a lot more to enhance the data, to really clarify the data and bring sense of, what are the demands on suppliers, and new insights of the data. And again, that will be sold, but the core underlying data will be free.
The point that is interesting there is also that being generous and offering the data back does not compromise your business. It is an integral part of that. So without banalizing it, this kind of freemium model is working for you. You don't need to be protective. You just need to price correctly the value added that you provide on top of the data you ingest and you transform.
Exactly, and we want people to use our product. We're happy. The more people that look at the data, the more likely we are to hear, okay, you've got a problem here. I'll give you a really good example. We've got a data source in, I think it's Spain. Someone's come to us and said, oh, you've got the published date and the deadline date the wrong way around. So the deadline date was coming up as tomorrow, and the published date was coming up as tomorrow, and vice versa. So, and we would never have spotted that unless someone was using the data. And so when we have open data, we have more people using it. We've got like 40 or 50 people using it, some of whom are paying nothing, but they are required to tell everyone about us, and they're also required to help us make it better. So it's a powerful incentive to give stuff away.
That's great. Well, it was great to meet you again, Ian. Good luck with future business, and I'm sure that the next time we meet again, you will have more stories to tell us. Thanks again, and have a good rest of the day.
And I will come and see you the next time I'm in the Netherlands.
Great, promise. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Gianfranco. Bye.